Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Just going to wait a few seconds here and then we'll get going on kind of a little bit of a new feature, or at least some new wording that we announced, and make it a little more straightforward, the language. So, and answer any questions. So welcome. And I've got Michaela here. Michaela is going to help us out a little bit later. And first thing I wanted to do is review absolute asset gifts. So, oops, hang on one second. I'm just going to share my screen. And we've talked about absolute asset gifts before, but I do also want to review this new wording that we've come up with to make things a little simpler. So the way eState works for absolute asset gifts, in some of them are dealt with in their own section. For example, a pet's gift, loyalty points are dealt with in their own section, loyalty points. Pets are another one. Loans, forgiveness of loans, that's dealt with in another one. RSPs, TFSA, life insurance beneficiary designations, they're obviously going to be in the joint and designated assets section, and that's going to be in a separate thing. And personal effects. Personal effects are going to be in their own section. Other assets like real estate or financial assets or anything other than those ones I've mentioned are going to all be dealt with in the initial gift section. And they'll be grouped based on which of the scenarios they're given under. So the scenarios, of course, are what if my spouse is alive, what if my spouse is not alive, but I have descendants alive, and what if everyone's gone. So they're going to group them by that category. So let me just demonstrate. I'm going to make a gift of my home, for example, to a specific person. We're talking about an absolute asset gift. So I'm going to drag the home and I'm going to drop it in the initial gift section. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my beneficiaries, either from the list of people that I've already created in my family tree or elsewhere as a class. Or I can also, of course, create a new person that I don't have yet in my list. Okay, let's just pick an easy one. I'm going to give my home to Daniel Walker. So we're talking again about absolute gifts. Because it's real estate, it's going to allow us to apply this gift to a property that's purchased in substitution for the original property. So that's what we have there. Then there'll be whatever conditions you want to add. The most common, which is our law is, which exists right now, is if you give real estate to someone that's subject to a mortgage, they take that gift with the mortgage. They assume the mortgage as well as when they assume the gift. So that is the default in our law, and that's why it's the default in eState. You can obviously change that, remove it, and make the estate pay assume the mortgage by deleting the assumption of mortgage condition, etc. And then there's the gift over. Let's leave that blank for a second, and let's go add. So here's a very, very straightforward gift. The home, I want to go to Daniel Walker. Okay. Now, what we used to have is a whole bunch of language about that, even though it was a very simple gift. And we talked about, with respect to my interest in the home, and I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Now what we do is when it sees that it's a very simple gift, okay? That is, it's an absolute gift with no gift overs. It's going to, and no conditions other than assumption of mortgage, for example, it's going to print a very simple gift here. And if I have an address, it's going to put in the address, etc. So in this case, when you've got a home, if you're giving it directly, you should put in an address for that property. So I'll just show you how to do that. We're going to go to the asset. We're going to go to the home. We're going to see, oh yeah, there's no address. Let's do 123 Sesame Street. And put it in Toronto, let's just say. And And then when we refresh this, it's going to put in the address. Okay. So that's how it gets populated. And you'll see, if those of you are familiar with an absolute gift in eState, that it used to be a much more complicated provision. Now it's very straightforward. And if you want, you can put the PIN in. It prompts you for that. If you don't, you can just delete this clause when you generate it in Word. But that's what's going to happen with simple gifts now. Okay. And that will apply to any kind of a gift. Let's try dealing with the investment portfolio as an example. Okay. So we're going to drag the investment portfolio into the initial gifts. Okay. And then we're going to pick our beneficiaries. Again, we could add a new person. We can pick more than one person. We can do those kinds of things. If you pick more than one person, it's always going to deal with it equally. Okay. So that makes sense. It's a simple gift, and that's what we're trying to do. So we have an absolute gift of the investment portfolio. Now, the name here that we give to the asset in the document is the name of the asset itself. Okay. So let me show you what I'm talking about there. If I go to assets and I go to that investment portfolio, eState's going to, when it puts that in the document, it's going to copy it from the asset name. That's this field right here. So it's going to start with the word the, and then it's going to say the investment portfolio, to transfer the investment portfolio to whatever. Okay. If I want this identified in some other way, then we have to put that in an asset name. So I would say the investment account number 345 at Raymond James. Okay, that's what's now going to be printed in the gift. Okay, so let's just do that. And eState will prompt you for that, because if it sees that there are any specific gifts of assets, it's going to prompt you for a definition. And that's what we mean in the definition. We mean define what you mean by, either put it somewhere else or define it in the actual name. So there you see this gift of the investment portfolio. And again, we're talking about transferring. Remember, this is always a tricky situation. Whenever you have instructions, and this is not about eState so much as just generally, whenever you have instructions from a client to say, give this asset to this person, always have your red flag go up, because that has a lot of ramifications that are unintended. There's and things, eState warns you about these things, like tax implications of those kinds of things. But also, especially bank accounts, you have no idea, and the client has no idea what's going to be in that bank account or that investment account when they die. And regardless of what's in there, if there's $1 or there's $5 million, that's going to this person or these people. I mean, is that really what they intend? It probably is not. They are probably thinking like a client, whereas we're supposed to be advising them as a lawyer, which is, yeah, that account may be non-existent, and then they get nothing. It might have all your assets in it. It might, so always, always, always be careful and dig down about why are they giving this particular account as a legacy or a bequest. It's less the case with real estate, but it's sometimes the case with real estate. So, but that's how eState does absolute asset gifts. It's a drag and drop, and then it'll depend on what you pick as to what's going to, decide. It's always good to have the preview open, because if I had provided for a gift over at the current time, and we're going to probably update this, but at the current time, if there's a gift over, to beneficiaries' children, it's going to not see that as a simple gift anymore. And so it's going to use the more fulsome wording that was, the sort of the old wording that we use in more complicated situations. And so that's what you're going to see in eState. You're going to see this whole thing with respect to my interest in, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So for now, that's how we do it. If we see that there's a gift over, because we try not to make too many changes without making sure they're not going to have an impact on the interpretation or anything else. So we want to always, right now we're in the midst of testing this as far as gift overs being included in the simple language, so that there's no no problem. But again, if you have the preview open, you can see what's going to come out before you do it. So are there any questions about it or about asset gifts? Obviously, this is just your typical simple asset gifts, and we'll concentrate right now on absolute asset gifts because trust gifts are much more complicated, and we'll save that for another time. Any questions? Just unmute and or type it in the chat. Some warnings that eState, while I'm waiting for any questions, some warnings from eState that you might get if there's a specific gift of things. You'll see warnings about the tax implications of certain things, you know, and that's, you know, warnings because we're worried about the tax implications of, you know, specific assets and things like that. So those are all those things. Anything else? All right. Again, be very careful when instructions are for absolute asset gifts of assets, because it's tricky. All right, Michaela, I'm going to stop sharing. And Michaela's, for those who were here 2 weeks ago, we were demonstrating, I was trying to demonstrate how you use custom language in eState. And Michaela's going to take us through, because I was using a platform that's the professional plan, where you can have not only firm precedents, but you can have individual lawyer precedents. And my individual preferences were overriding my firm preferences. So that was the problem. But Michaela, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So basically, when you log in, you get to this screen. You just go over to the Documents tab. That's where you're going to set all your default sort of customization, so you're not having to change it each time at the client level. Then you're just going to choose what document you want to customize. I'm going to do the short will. And you don't need to worry about that message. That was what Jordy was talking about on the professional plan. But then you're going to get this pop-up. And let's say I want to go and customize one of the administrative provisions. So I just scroll down to administrative provision options. I click on that button. And then these are all the different sort of clauses you can customize. And then there's subcategories within some of them. So let's just say I'm going to do the sale, postpone sale, this one, specifically the sell postpone. And so right now it's set to the default, which is eState's default. Some of them also have a simplified option, which is a bit shorter. And then some of them will have this custom option, which is where you can paste in your custom clause. So testing is going to be what my custom clause is for this provision that I want to come up in all of these short wills that I do. So then I just say done, 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 save. And so now it's going to be saved with my custom administrative provision. So I'm going to go back into the client file. And this is just my test client. I'm going to go up to the documents generation button. And then I'm going to find short will. So if you click on the actual name instead of the checkbox, it's going to bring you into this sort of preview function where you can preview the document, and you can also look at the settings. So if I go over to my administrative provisions setting options here, I'm going to make sure that it's set to the correct thing. So I click on it, then I go back into sell postpone, and it's set to custom. So it's got my testing custom clause there. And so now when I generate the actual document, over on the side, I just generate the preview. I can check to see that that specific administrative provision, my custom provision, is going to be included in the document now. So I'm just going to scroll to the administrative provisions section. Oh, did I miss it? Let me just testing. There it is, right here. So here's my custom clause now. So that's sort of how you get your custom clauses for administrative provisions and definitions in the document. And for POAs, you can actually do content as well. But for the wills right now, it's more of the definitions and administrative provisions. Anything you want to add, Jordy?
No, except that you did something here that if you're not on the professional plan, you don't need to do, which is choose which lawyer's
Yeah, you don't
precedent.
need to worry about this
Don't
button.
worry about that. Yes.
Yeah.
You won't see that unless you're on a professional plan. And then you can make changes to for this particular client. Let's say you didn't want to use your custom admin provisions. You want to use the eState provision. You can do that as well, just by setting it for this particular client.
I just change it back to the default because I'm in the client file. So it's just changing the settings for the short will for this client. And then I would refresh and it would get rid of my custom provision and would input eState's default provision instead.
Exactly. There it is.
Is.
So that's how you do it when you know what you're doing. And thanks, Michaela.
No problem.
Yes. Does that, I know that some of you may have had questions from last week. I hope that answered it. So anybody got any topics of interest or questions? Insights in a separate document. One day we might do that, but they're all dynamic. So every time you change something, there'll be a different set of them. So we're figuring out a best way to do that, to be honest with you. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Good to see you as well. So the other thing we're working on, just so you know, just so we try to keep you up to date. So we're working on much more customization for the residue clauses and simplifying language. So if you want to use different language, more simple trust provisions and things like that, we're working on that. And that's a year-long project, but we're making great strides actually on that. So at some point in the next little bit, we'll be able to customize some of your preferences and things like that, and make it more to your liking. Yeah, that's a good. So the PIN number, we should probably add that, and I think we have that on our list. So that's yes. Thanks for the PIN recommendation. I'm going to put that in. It shouldn't be too hard. There was some other question there that I talked about having the clients do their own, communicate and draft the will by itself. No, I am not working on that. I'm trying to keep lawyers and financial advisors in business. At this point, that is not anywhere on the radar. I think there's great value that we add. And so I don't want to be, I don't want to be doing that. Any other topics or questions? The purpose for those who are new to this Tuesday webinar, I usually have and Michaela and I usually have a little bit of an introduction on a feature or something, but then it's open to people who say, oh, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Or so feel free to reach out, and we can do it with everybody watching. If you are uncomfortable with that, we can do it offline. But usually if someone's having a problem with doing something, it's good if I show everyone and they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know how to do that either. That's most of the time, that's the case. So, yeah. I like the PIN idea. I'm sure we have it on our list. Because I have to do that too every time. So, great. Well, if there's no further questions, I'm going to bid adieu to everyone, and hope to see you this Thursday. I know Suzanne and Ian are speaking at the upcoming Thursday webinar on PCOR and what's going on with PCOR and resulting trust presumptions and things like that. So that's a great one. And hope to see you all on Thursday. And feel free, everyone knows, I hope, the question, made clause. Obviously it's not binding on anything, but so I'm not sure. I don't have one, Charlie. So yeah, Janet, thanks for that. You can't download documents separately, and I'll explain why you can't. there's a lot of, as there are in any, even if you were doing this manually, there's a lot of cross references between the primary will and the secondary will, where you refer to this paragraph of the primary will and that paragraph of the secondary will. And that's very important to get those cross references right. Well, Word can only cross reference within one document. So we can never use, you can never say cross reference from this document to that document. And that's why it's always generated in the in one document. A trick that I use, and I'm just going to demonstrate this because that's a great, so these are great questions, by the way. So if I generated a multiple will and let's say it's a really complicated multiple will, the primary will, for whatever reason, needed a lot of manual drafting. Okay. I'm just going to download this. And I want to just get the primary will out first before I do the whole thing and make manual changes to the secondary will. I want to get the client to review it. I want to go over some instructions or whatever. So there's a way in Word that you can just simply hide the secondary will, and the client won't see it when you send them a draft in a PDF. So I'm just going to demonstrate how I do it. So here's the Word document, and we're going to enable editing. And so here's the thing, and I don't want to, so I've worked on this primary will, blah, blah, blah. And I've, I'm saving and I'm saving and I'm saving, and I don't want them to even see that I'm working on a secondary will. So I highlight the whole secondary will, okay, all the way to the bottom, okay. And maybe I want to leave in the guide, okay, but I want to block everything else out. There's a function here in Home that's under fonts, okay? And I can set fonts to hidden, okay? If I set that to hidden, that's going to all disappear in essence. Now, you have to set, you can still see it, and I'll show you how you do that. That's in your settings. You can set your settings to be able to view things like that. And I just don't know where that is actually in info. But if you set your settings, you can actually view it in Word. But when you generate it in a PDF, the client won't see it. And so that's the benefit of that. And so it's really helpful when you're, if you're working on one, you only want to show them one, the primary or the secondary, you can do that. And yet the references will still work properly. Okay. So does that, I don't know if that helps, but the short answer is you can't just generate one because we need it to be in the same document for Word. Okay. Anything? That's a great question though. Those are perfect questions. I'm just trying to think. I don't usually use this version of Word that has that doesn't have the option. Oh, there's options. So here's options, and you can, one of the options is you want to see the hidden text. Options, hidden text. Now I can actually see the hidden text, but it's all underlined. You see how there's little dots under these? So that just means it's not going to print out, or when I save it as a PDF, it's not going to print that portion. Okay. So just to show you how I set that settings, if you're ever going to use hidden text, go to File, down here, Options, Display Hidden Text or not. Okay. And again, this is all Word stuff. This has nothing to do with eState, but and if you have questions, use the question mark. Just click on it. Question mark, live chat if you want. You can browse, or you can search, or you can chat with Michaela or me just by clicking the live chat, and up will come the live chat button, and we can say, how do I download just the multiple will, single will or whatever, and we'll get right back to you. So you don't have to wait for Tuesdays. That's all I'm saying. Any other questions? Thanks for that. All right. Well, have a great afternoon, everybody, and hope to see you on Thursday.